Well, a very good evening to you. We are live. This show is called Cracking the Podcast Code, and I think you know from my channel by now that my aim is to find out how independent podcasters can actually achieve hit shows online. That is my goal. That's what I'm trying to find out. And in this new series, what I'm doing is I'm interviewing people who are doing at least one thing that has really stood out, that they're doing exceptionally well, that I just want to learn how they're doing it so that we can all learn from them. It could be content, it could be social media, it could be getting guests, absolutely anything. But one specific thing that I want to focus on. Now, did you know that most podcasters give up after 8 to 10 episodes? It is very easy to think that it won't happen to me. Well, just like in business, your chances of success are small. And most businesses, as we know, fail. The majority of people watching this will probably quit their podcast too. But just like business, it doesn't have to be this way. And there are people out there who've shown that you can keep going and you can keep enjoying podcasting and find new challenges and opportunities. One such person is Mike Winter, who sadly, we can't get him on video tonight, but we can get his logo on the screen. So just imagine that Mike Winter, who has a comedy, political, topical show, looks just like that. A microphone with a tongue hanging out. And a very good evening to you, Mike. Hopefully we can hear you there.
Good evening, Richard. How are you?
I am very well indeed. I'm going to ask you the first question then. Why do you think you didn't Podfade?
I've always been a very imaginative person who needed a creative outlet. So first it was public access television here in the States. Then that moved into podcasting. So I'm a type of person that needs to be creative and do creative things. My mind never stops thinking of new things to say and new things to talk about. And if I don't have an outlet for that, I'll probably just go insane. So that's one of the reasons.
So it's that creative side, but why is it then? Because I think a lot of people start podcasting with that creative side to them. Why do you think you didn't Podfade?
Again, it's back to the whole creative process. I don't care. I think a lot of people get wrapped up in numbers. If they don't see their numbers drastically increasing after 20 to maybe even 100 episodes, then they just give up because it looks like they're not going to become famous. For me, it's not about becoming famous. It's an outlet. It's not about making money, really, because you can't make a lot of money doing this. You can make some, and I have, but it's about having a voice and being able to share that voice with whomever.
So the most important thing for you is that creative outlet. It's just
yes,
going through the process.
Yes, absolutely.
Why do you think other people do Podfade then?
It's they're not seeing the increase in numbers, and they're realizing that doing a podcast or a video on YouTube is a lot of work. It's real work to set up your show and buy the equipment and do all the editing and yada, yada, yada is real work. It takes real time. And if they're not good at balancing their time, then they're just going to burn out and move on to something easier.
Do you think a lot of people maybe set too high expectations? I mean, it was interesting because I've spoken to you before and you've talked about the fact that you started with very different aims and goals than perhaps how you've ended up with now.
Yeah, I think so. I'd agree with that.
I mean, but when you started, did you start with that kind of whole idea of having a big business? A lot of people start a podcast and they kind of have this idea of that I'm going to get thousands of people who are going to follow me. I'm going to become an influencer. I'm going to do this and doing this. And then, you start to get more into the realistic, real world of it and start to enjoy the process more for what it is.
I was always realistic about how many people I would get to listen, because it helps to start out doing this if you're already famous, because you've already got a built-in audience, whether it be doing local radio or a Hollywood movie star, you've already got your fan base. So when you start doing this, it's easy. I never expected to have thousands of downloads per show or make a whole lot of money. It's just a hobby. I do it for fun. And I think more people need to realize that that's what it is.
What do you think has been the worst moment for you where you were going to quit? And Tell us how you got through that. Give us some ideas about how you dealt with that and how other people can when they get to that moment where they just go, this is just so much.
For me, when I was going through my divorce, I didn't have a lot of time for podcasting. I wasn't in the right headspace for it. I didn't feel like being funny anymore. It kind of died a little bit inside me. But after a couple of months of dealing and grieving that loss, I felt like I found my voice again, and it became therapeutic to do the podcast and get things off my chest.
So how do you think that can apply to other podcasters as well when they get into that point of, I'm not sure I can put in the time, because hopefully they're not going through the same situation that you did. How do you think you can apply the lessons that you learned to other people?
They got to have a love for it. You've got to love it. It's got to be almost something that you were born to do. There were people that were born to entertain and do shows like this, like yourself, me, and many, many, many others. But there are some people that were never cut out for this. They fantasized that they would be good enough. And then when reality hits and they realize, maybe this isn't the right fit for me. Maybe, it's just better they stop.
Mm-hmm. But what about for those that do have some potential? And I mean, in a way, as you say, some people can carry on, even if you've got, 5 mates that might be actually listening to your family who are listening to it, you can carry on, can't you? And still enjoy yourself. But, a lot of people, I think, hit that bit at sort of 8-10 episodes where they go, this is a lot more work than I thought. I thought I'd just sit down, press record on the microphone and stop it, and it's all sorted. And then they realize there is more work. So, I mean, how do you think these people can get through it? What can they learn from you about that persistence? Because you have kept going for years.
Ask people what they like about your show that that listen all the time, and ask them for feedback. Talking with people that listen to you and seem to really enjoy what you're doing does provide a spark. So I'd suggest doing that.
I think it's useful as well to get the feedback from them as well, in terms of, for me personally, I like to get some kind of response, because it makes you feel like someone actually values what you're doing. If you feel like you're just doing something purely into the ether with no response at all, even if it's a criticism, I think it's quite hard to carry on, isn't it? It's nice to get a bit of feedback in some way.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed the criticisms. That just spurs me on. You can't take anything too hard when you're on and you're looking at your reviews on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever, and you get some negative ones in there. You can't take it too hard. You don't know these people from Adam. They could just be trolling you for kicks, or maybe they just genuinely don't like your show, which is fine, because there's 900,000 other podcasts that they can go listen to. You can't take it to heart, and you are going to get better if you have some ability with this. The more shows you do, the smoother you're going to get, and you will get better.
Tell us a little bit about your show as well, because we haven't really mentioned it yet. I mean, we're having a very sort of serious, blunt conversation here about Podfade, but tell us a bit about what you do.
You said it had to be serious, so I'm behaving.
Sorry, my fault.
My show.
Your show, anyway.
My show is comedy. It's slice of life, current event type speak, like watching a late night talk show like Stephen Colbert or Conan or whatever, or Stern. I guess Howard Stern would be my hero. He's somebody that got me into broadcasting, and I'd say my show is a bit of it's a poor man's Howard Stern show, is what it is. I'm not afraid to talk about anything, and I'll switch subjects every other minute, as you well know, and get into something completely different. There's rarely where I have it all listed out of here's what I'm going to talk about, and that's the show. I don't like to script it. It's a lot of improv. I do impersonations. I do phony phone calls. I have on strange guests, but it's always about having fun. I guess except for lately here in the States, we've had a bit of
You've had plenty of
trouble.
content to deal with, haven't you?
Yeah, I've almost like stopped watching American news and I started watching the BBC for news now because I can't take all the opinions
Oh,
from
you'll find
CNN
plenty,
and Fox.
plenty around on that one. But in a way, I mean, that's also, as we just said, is one of the reasons that, in a way, it's quite nice to be in a niche like yours, isn't it? Because you can actually start to get people to engage with those kinds of comments rather than just talking out there into the ether. It's interesting to actually get that reaction, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fun. I've been stopped by some coworkers that listen to my show and um, they bring up certain things that I talked about and want to discuss it off air with me, and that's always fun too.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'm a little jealous of niche shows like yours, where you have the same subject and you're getting deeper and deeper and deeper into it. With me, it's always a bit of a mad scramble to decide what I'm going to talk about based on the news every week. But with you, I mean, you're dedicated to this one subject, and I don't know, does that make it easier for you each week?
I think it's interesting for me, in terms of avoiding Podfade again, because it's something that I'm personally passionate about and I want to find the answer to. So when I started, I think like every podcaster, when you first start, you get zero reaction at all. And you're putting in all this time and all this effort, and it's going absolutely nowhere, and you're getting no response. No one's following you on Twitter. No one's listening to your podcast. But because I was doing a show that I genuinely wanted to know the answers to myself, that motivated me. So in a way, all I was actually doing, I seem to remember talking to you about this a long time ago, is that I was effectively just journaling what I was doing, and that made it something that allowed me to just carry on. Because it's a bit like some people do kind of weight loss, YouTube and podcasts and stuff like this. And I think they start off at times just putting it out there to kind of hold themselves to account so that they lose the weight themselves. And the fact that they then get 10,000 followers following them after that is actually just a bonus that helps them along. So for me, I think this was a crucial thing for me on this particular series compared to the other 5 shows that I did before. But for you, you had a very different experience of what made you avoid Podfade, which was the sheer creativity of it.
Mm-hmm. It helps to be a creative person when you get into this business.
Mm.
If you're somebody that's super structured with not a lot of imagination, I think you're really going to struggle.
What would be, from your experience, from your long experience in podcasting, what would your advice be to me? I mean, putting aside what I just said there, as to how I would avoid Podfade with what I'm doing. What do you think are the biggest hurdles that I'm likely to experience doing it, hopefully, as long as you've been?
That's the tough question. That's really personal. I mean, what equals success for you? Is it big numbers? Is it getting legions and legions of fans such as myself that are constantly reaching out to you and trying to grab the hem of your garment for advice? Is that what you want? Do you want a full box?
The main kick for me would be if I had a whole bunch of people who got value from what I was finding out and didn't make the same mistakes I've made. If I got people kind of going, Rick, that was a great bit of research. Thanks so much for doing that. I'm going to avoid that now. That, in a way, is the real kick I want from it.
Well, I've learned a lot from you.
Oh, well, thank you. That's one person.
I enjoy your show. I feel like I've learned a lot and probably saved money by listening to you and not trying some of the dopey marketing things that I was, kicking around doing.
But do you think that's it then? I mean, what I'm getting from what you're saying there is that it is about knowing what your clear goals are. With me, I know that I need to get that reaction from people to feel that sense of value.
So yeah, I guess so. I guess that's what works.
Yeah. Well, have you any other thoughts? Because it's we're literally making this a very quick, short show. So, any other thoughts about how people can avoid Podfade from your experience?
Just keep getting the feedback. If you feel like you're getting overwhelmed, I'll take a page out of your book and say that they need to have it all structured. They need to balance their time. So they're not doing a show that takes an hour and then procrastinating and editing their show on the last day before it's supposed to drop, where they're in front of the computer for hours and hours and hours on end. And then they feel like they're dedicating all this time to something that's not giving them anything back. And that's another reason for Podfade, where they feel like nobody's listening and they don't have a support system. I see that on these Facebook groups all the time with podcasters in it, indie podcasters, complaining that they don't have the support. Is that a millennial thing, that they need so much damn support? You and I are Gen X, Richard. So
we're
we
all
invented
and twisted.
We are, and that's fine. We grew up in a different generation. I don't know why the millennials need so much hand holding. You know?
There's one thing I would add to that, actually, is I think one thing I see a lot on Twitter and on social media as well is people kind of going, oh, please follow me. And it's like, well, why? I could do that because I'm being your friend, but it's got to actually genuinely provide me with some interest or value. There are podcasts out there. I think I mentioned this on my own show before. I listened to a podcast which was a half-hour monologue of this guy talking about taking part in an ultra marathon. And now that was interesting to me once, to hear about it, and it was genuinely fascinating. I didn't think I'd listen to the whole thing, and I was absolutely gripped by the story. But would I go back on a regular basis? No. I'm not. You might be able to tell I'm not an ultra marathon runner, just by the physique here, since I've got my video on. But the point is that you're not going to genuinely support beyond showing a token gesture support to things that you're not interested in or curious about. I mean, I love a lot of different things, and I love looking at different shows to see what they're doing and how they're being creative. So that's what's touching my buttons for me. But ultimately, I think you have to build that support group you just said from people who are actually genuinely interested in that niche, because otherwise it's pure token gesturism, isn't it?
Yes. And I see a lot of posts also in these Facebook groups from people experiencing Podfade, and they can't understand why. It's like, I don't know why I don't get more listens on my show. It's me and my friends every week talking about stuff we like. And I just wish we'd get more support because we're really enjoying ourselves. It's the second part of that that's important. We're really enjoying ourselves. That's what it's about. You don't need the big numbers. You and your friends are spending quality time together, bonding and having fun. That's what it's about.
It's the main
for
message.
Me, anyway.
Have fun. Mike, where do people find you?
They find me everywhere. I'm like COVID-19. I'm on every social media. A nightmare. Yes. I'm on every social media platform, WiseCrackin With Winter. If you want to listen to the show, it's on all the podcast apps, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. I have my own website, getwisecrackin.com. I'm impossible. It's so hard not to find me. You'd really have to try.
Appearing on your show as well. It's been a lot of fun. I mean, what did we cover? Brexit. That was one thing, and then we went on to whether Santa Claus really existed or something, wasn't it? And we went round and round with your producer Paul as well, so it was a lot of fun.
Yes, Father Christmas versus Santa Claus, who would win in a fist fight, and who exists.
Mike, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks very much for sharing your wisdom this evening as well. As I say, we're going to be doing more of these very short, sort of cracking the podcast code, talking to different podcasters who I've noticed are doing one particular thing exceptionally well, and I'm going to get them on and get them to share with me and with you how they actually do it and some of the lessons they've learned along the way. So this is going to be something that I'm going to be doing more and more of over time. And if you've got a particular story about your podcasting project that you think could be really useful to pass on to people, or you just wish that someone had said when you got started, then I would love to hear about it myself, and I'm sure many other people would as well. So I'm going to be making this part of my whole Can I Make a Hit podcast series. Thank you very much to Mike Winter. I will add some details and links on this YouTube video once it's finished, once I've worked out how I can get this to work because of all the problems at the beginning. Thank you to Mike. Thank you to you. And I will do this again soon.